expired. We'll move to question time, and I call Senator Chandler.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Can the Minister confirm that your own budget shows young Australians today face a diabolical combination of higher inflation, higher interest rates, higher taxes, lower real wages, lower living standards and fewer homes, thanks to this government's reckless spending?
Thank you, Senator Chandler. Minister Gallagher.
Well, the answer to that is no, and I would say to those opposite that this budget is about making sure that generations of the future get a fair go. That's what it's about, and we've already noticed you saying no to that. You saying no to that. We have taken responsible decisions in this budget in a whole range of areas, whether it be in tax reform, whether it be in spending restraint, whether it be in our fiscal strategy, whether it be in our investments in housing and relief to make a difference for people. I will take the interjection on housing because I think it's important to let everyone know that those opposite didn't even have a housing policy, didn't even have a housing minister. The issues we are dealing with on the supply side are a combination of factors, but a big part of that was the fact that those opposite did nothing for more than a decade when it came to housing. The housing package in this budget delivers more housing. It works in partnership with the states and territories to deliver more housing, and there is more housing delivered in this budget, and it deals for the first time with the significant challenge of the intersection of tax policy or tax arrangements and housing industry and how that's working for young people. Now, we on this side of the chamber want to ensure that younger generations are not locked out and forever destined to life in the rental market if they want to own their own home. That's what we're about, making sure that younger generations have that opportunity, that they're not locked out forever, and this budget delivers on that, and we look forward to your support.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Chandler, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, can you confirm that your own budget shows after 4 years of Labor government, debt will soon hit $1 trillion and climb to $1.25 trillion, leaving a debt bomb for young Australians?
Thank you, Senator Chandler. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Chandler for the question. And I mean, if she's concerned about the projections for debt in this budget, she must have been extremely concerned when they forecast hitting $1.2 trillion under their final budget. When they were last in government, they forecast an increasing debt burden. They doubled the debt before the pandemic hit. They did nothing to pay down the debt. I know they like to pretend that everything is someone else's problem. We've seen that. That's the way they operate. We inherited $1 trillion of debt from those opposite, and what we have done consistently and again in this budget, debt is lower in every year of the forward estimates compared to what we inherited, and a share of the economy, gross and net debt, is and will remain lower than we inherited.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Chandler, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, can you confirm that your own budget shows the yearly interest bill on your debt bomb will hit more than $42 billion or more than $80,000 per minute, and that this bill will be passed on to young Australians through higher taxes?
Thank you, Senator Chandler. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, I don't want to continue the history lesson, but if we look when you were in government, and what we saw when we came to government was we inherited $1 trillion of debt forecast from you in 2023. Now, what we have managed is to lower debt, to pay down debt.
Order.
Debt is $173 billion lower under this budget, and we save in the order of $70 billion in interest payments. That's because of the responsible decisions that we've taken in this budget, and that is the approach that we will continue to take in future budgets. paying down debt, lowering it from what we inherited, and making sure that the interest payments are lower as well.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Polley.
President, my question is to the Minister for Finance, Senator Gallagher. Last night, the Treasurer handed down the Albanese Labor government's most responsible budget yet, while also delivering significant reforms to make our tax system fairer and support Australians with the cost of living. This has all been delivered at a time when the global oil shock is pushing up prices, putting pressure on growth and adding challenges for the Australian households. How does the Albanese Labor government's responsible approach support people under pressure and deliver for all Australians?
Thank you, Senator Polley. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Polley for that question and for the advocacy and work she does on behalf of the people of Tasmania. As the Treasurer said last night, this is the most important and ambitious budget in decades. It's a budget that responds to the pressures Australians are feeling right now, while putting in place the reforms needed for a stronger, fairer and more resilient economy. The conflict in the Middle East is feeding inflation, slowing growth and putting Australians under more strain. At the core of the budget is an economic strategy with 5 main parts: fuel security and resilience, cost of living relief, productivity, tax reform and responsible budget management. And under each of those 5 key areas, there are important investments in cost of living relief. A new $250 working Australians tax offset will benefit 13.3 million workers from the second half of 2027, paid automatically through tax returns. And this means that across the government's 5 tax cuts, including those that those opposite campaigned against, the average worker will be up to $2,816 better off in 2028. We're also making investments in housing and indeed in medicines and the ongoing funding in Medicare urgent care clinics, all areas where we know they're making a difference, where those have argued and criticised us for the investments we've made. But we know, and this budget continues the approach, to find and support households with those important cost of living measures.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Polley, first supplementary.
The Finance Minister, our very fine Senator Gallagher, and the Treasurer have been clear that the Albanese Labor government's 5th budget saves more than it spends while still funding essential services and responding to major pressures across the economy. How does the budget build on the job of budget repair, and why is that continued task so important?
Thank you, Senator Polley. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much. I thank Senator Polley for that question, and it's an important one. This budget does pay enormous emphasis on fiscal repair and strong, responsible economic management. Alongside the budget, this means that the budget is $44.9 billion stronger than MyEFO and more than $250 billion better off than what we inherited. Deficits are lower in every year than forecast when we came to government in 2022. Debt in 2026-27 is $173 billion better than inherited, avoiding more than $70 billion in interest costs over the decade. There are $63.8 billion worth of savings and reprioritisations, which takes our total saves since coming to government to almost $180 billion. And for the first time on record, consecutive updates have returned every dollar of revenue upgrades to repair the bottom line.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Polley, second supplementary.
President, this budget responds to immediate pressures while pursuing the reforms Australia needs. How does the Albanese Labor government's responsible approach support people under pressure and deliver for all Australians?
Thank you, Senator Polley. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Polley for that supplementary. This budget is about aspiration and fairness, helping with cost of living, boosting resilience in uncertain times and showing savings and reform can all work together. Against global uncertainty, the budget invests in Australia's resilience and economic sovereignty, delivers more cost of living help and new tax cuts for workers, backs small business aspiration and innovation, levels the playing field for first home buyers and helps put home ownership back within the reach of younger Australians. It includes $64 billion in savings and reprioritisations, taking total savings since coming to government to $178 billion, and it sets out more responsible budget repair and more economic reform than any other budget this century.
Thank you. Before I go to the next question, I draw to the attention of honourable senators the presence in the chamber of a parliamentary delegation from the National Assembly of Kenya. On behalf of all senators, I wish you a warm welcome to Australia and in particular to the Senate. Senator Hume.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong, and I refer to an example in the government's own budget documents. Jack has a taxable income before capital gains of $25,000 and realises a capital gain of $10,000 on an asset that he purchased. Jack does not receive an income support payment, so he's not exempt from the minimum tax. The tax on Jack's capital gain of $10,000 is $1,400, or a tax rate of 14%. As this is lower than the 30%, Jack pays an additional $1,600 in tax to bring the tax rate on his capital gain up to 30%. This cannot be true. Why is the Albanese government forcing Australians earning $25,000 a year to pay $1,600 in additional tax through their high-taxing budget?
I'm waiting for the chamber to come to order before I call the minister. Senator Cash, Senator Watt. Order. 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 Order across the chamber. Order. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Hume for the opportunity to talk about the budget and to talk about the changes to tax, and to say to her that I realise her legacy for the Liberal Party was more higher deficit and higher taxes, but that is not the approach we are taking. What we are doing is changing the tax system to give young Australians a chance. We are changing the tax system to give young Australians a chance. And I've heard the discussion on the other side about aspiration, and I ask them, what is more aspirational than the Australian dream of owning your own home? What is more aspirational than that? And why are you standing in the way of that? And the Treasurer has outlined in great detail, and I'd invite Senator Hume to read the budget papers, because they tell a story. They tell the story of how the generational impact of the tax system that we have has on the capacity of young people to get a fair chance to have the sort of opportunities that we have. That is what these papers show. And we believe on this side that it is part of our obligation as those who form the government in the country to make sure that the next generation of Australians has the same opportunities for home ownership and to get ahead that many of the people in this chamber have. That is the fundamental promise of this budget, and fundamentally it is the promise that you cannot countenance. You cannot countenance. Because for you, the status quo, which continues to ensure that younger Australians do not have the same advantages, you accept that.
Thank you,
we
Minister.
on this side
the time
do not.
for answering has expired. Before I call you, Senator Hume, I expect questions, when ministers rise to answer questions, I expect them to be heard in silence. I must have had to yell order at the very top of my voice at least 5 times, and you all ignored me. The running commentary is disrespectful, and you will listen in silence. Senator Hume.
The Prime Minister admitted today that he has used negative gearing in the past. He admitted that he still does. That's a great rags to riches story for a boy from social housing. Why is the Prime Minister happy to deny the next generation the opportunities that he used to build wealth and get ahead?
Before I call the minister, order. Minister Gallagher. Order. Order. Senator Cash. The question has been asked. I'm going to invite Senator Wong to answer it. Minister Wong.
I'd make a few points. The first is people can still use negative gearing when they invest in a new build. That is the position the government has articulated in the budget, and we have acknowledged this is a change. This is a change, and why have we made this change? Why have we made this change? And really, the budget papers go through this very clearly. What they show is that the combination of capital gains tax and negative gearing has the effect of privileging the position of investors in the housing market. And what we want to try and ensure is that the composition of the housing includes more owner-occupiers, because we want more young people to enter the housing market, have the same opportunities as you had. That is what this is about. And, of course, what we are also combining it with is tax reform that delivers more for working Australians. Again, something
thank you,
that
Minister.
those opposite cannot countenance.
Thank you, Minister. I'm waiting for silence again. Senator Hume, second supplementary.
According to his own budget documents, the Prime Minister is forcing low-income Australians to pay thousands in extra tax and closing the door on opportunities that he used to young Australians. Isn't it clear that this budget is nothing but a shameless tax grab which denies opportunity for young Australians to get ahead?
Thank you. I wait for silence. Senator Hume, you've asked your question. Minister Wong.
What?
Senator Cash, you shouldn't be talking to anyone. Minister Wong.
What I would say to those opposite about tax is that not only does this budget contain a new tax cut for every working Australian, but the combination of the tax cuts that this government has or will or is delivering is around $2,800 to someone on the average income. And that stands in stark contrast to Senator Hume, who went to the last election promising Australians higher taxes. Promising Australians higher taxes. And, Senator, you may shout and wiggle your finger at me and look down your nose at me, but nothing will get you to run. You will never be able to run away from the fact that you are higher taxes Hume. Higher taxes Senator Hume. That is what you are, and you will always be.
Order. 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 Well, that was a pretty disgraceful response. So disgraceful that it was impossible for me to get order because all of you were interjecting. Senator Steele-John.
Thank you, President. My question is to Minister Gallagher. Minister, your government's budget cut $180 billion, in fact $185 billion, from the NDIS over the decade, the largest reduction to a government programme in living memory. Minister, are you proud that your government is making 10 times more from the funding of disabled people than it is taking from the ultra-wealthy property investors?
Thank you, Senator Steele-John. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Steele-John for the question, and I do think it's been an important budget to ensure the ongoing sustainability of the NDIS. Now, I've been around a while, and when the NDIS was originally established and the information available to everyone was that at full rollout it would annually be cost in the order of $13 billion. The situation we're at now and that it would help in the order of assist and support in the order of 460,000. Where we are now, with some years down the track, is that the scheme is exceeding $50 billion, and outside of the aged pension, it's the largest social program in the country. Without taking action, and at the current growth rates, it would exceed $70 billion. And I think, and the government's taken the view, that if that is allowed to continue, then the sustainability of the scheme is in question. And so, yes, we have taken some really hard decisions, a lot of work that Senator McAllister has done, along with the Health Minister, to look at how we can protect the scheme, return it to its original focus, but also importantly, Senator Steele-John, is rebuild the system outside the NDIS, and there is investments in this budget to do that. At the moment, if you are not in the NDIS and you need extra support, it doesn't exist unless you have dollars to pay for it. And I think and that is a problem. And again, we can put our head in the sand and say, oh, well, we'll leave that as a problem for somebody else down the track. Or we can sit down and try and work out how we return the NDIS to its original intention, it is idea and program. It's quite different to that now. Anyone who has watched the NDIS understands that. Yes, we need to focus on compliance and all the other issues, but we need to deal with these big challenges as well.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Steele-John, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, when governments have previously changed the NDIS, they have assured the disability community that no one would be worse off. Can you guarantee today that no disabled person will lose support, receive less support, or be left worse off under your government's changes?
Thank you, Senator Steele-John. Minister Gallagher. Order.
Well, this budget tries to deal with those reforms in two ways. So in the first way, trying to manage the growth of the scheme immediately, and some of that's to do with plan inflation and the reassessments of plans. And then there's a second piece of work around how we manage some of the other changes that are going to be required in the NDIS. And I know that under the leadership of Senator McAllister and the Health Minister, that will be done in consultation with the disability community.
Sorry, Senator Steele-John.
Relevance, President. My question was very clearly, will you guarantee that no one will be worse off? I would draw the Minister's attention to answering that basic question.
Thank you, Senator Steele-John. The Minister is being relevant to the question you asked. Minister Gallagher.
In terms of people's support needs for day-to-day support and their disability supports, we are about protecting that and making sure that the budget can fund that in an ongoing sense. Now, at the moment, the scheme is growing and has been growing much faster than anyone expected, and we need to deal with that. I think the failure to do so would put at risk the NDIS as a program.
Has expired. Senator Steele-John, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, we understand that the government's so-called Thriving Kids programme is intended for children under 9. Your government has been silent on what will happen to autistic teenagers and adults. Many are wondering whether they will be part, autistic adults and teenagers, of the 160,000 your government intends to kick off the scheme. What alternative supports will you fund for autistic adults and teenagers in this budget?
Thank you, Senator Steele-John. Minister Gallagher.
Well, we have made provisions in order to build the system that exists outside the NDIS, and I can speak about this because I know personally. And my daughter's spoken about this. Outside the NDIS, for young autistic people that need an extra hand, there is very little offering that doesn't cost money. Unless you have money, you're not going to be able to go and get the supports you need. And so part of our motivation is to make sure that the system that exists outside the scheme is there to help people and support people. And they may need to come in, they may need more support at a particular point in time, need less, or need a particular program. That is exactly what we want to rebuild. The system outside the NDIS used to exist. It doesn't exist anymore. We've got to rebuild that, and Senator McAllister and Minister Butler will consult on that, and there are provisions in the budget for that.
Thank you. Senator Brown.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Housing, Senator Ayres. Building more homes and making housing fairer has been a key focus of the Albanese Labor government. Yesterday, the government announced further decisive action to help more Australians into home ownership. Minister, how will the measures in the budget help more Australians buy their own home, and what will be the impact on housing supply?
Thank you, Senator Brown. Minister Ayres.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Senator Brown. Well, this budget is landmark Labor reform. This is a government that in this budget isn't doing the easy thing or the convenient thing. We are doing the right thing for Australians, particularly young Australians, getting more Australians into their own home. And too many young Australians know that the system is weighted against them. We have made decisions in this budget to fix up those problems. Those opposite have said they're going to take that away from young Australians. They're going to take those opportunities away from young Australians. Don't you worry about Jack's tax, worry about Jane's tax, I think, if I was you. That is why we are levelling the playing field for young Australians in this budget. The changes to capital gains tax and negative gearing remove that unfair disadvantage. That's what they do. And that's what people want out of their parliaments and their governments, is to act in their interests. To act in their interests. That inequity is something that Australian first home buyers, particularly young people, have faced for far too long. And carve-outs and the tax changes for new homes will drive housing investment towards new supply. I would have thought that's something that the coalition would have understood. And we're investing a further $2 billion, in infrastructure, along with our friends in the States, to unlock tens of thousands of new homes. That's what that will do. Pipes, pavements and power lines to power the homes of the future.
Thank you, Minister. I'm just waiting for silence. And the running commentary, particularly of those on the front bench on my left at the end, needs to stop. Senator Brown, first supplementary.
President, over the last 4 years, the Albanese Labor government has prioritised building more homes, with a particular focus on social and affordable homes. Minister, what progress has the government made in delivering more homes? How does greater housing supply benefit both home buyers and renters?
Just a moment, Minister Ayres. Senator Bragg, you were one of the people I was referring to, and I expect you to listen in silence. And if you can't, I invite you to leave the chamber. Minister Ayres.
I'd prefer he stayed for all of this, President, if he could. He might pick up on a few things, because more than anybody else, Senator Bragg has hampered and undermined the government's efforts to build new homes. But despite his efforts, leading the Liberals on this issue into a cul-de-sac.
Senator Bragg, you might think it's humorous. I have just called you to order. I've invited you to leave the chamber. You are not in a debate with me. You are not in a debate with the minister. This is question time. Senator Bragg, I will name you if you keep disrespecting my direction. And my direction is that you sit there in silence or you leave the chamber. That's the choice you have. Minister Ayres.
I shouldn't have wound him up, President. The truth is more than 660,000 homes have been built since we came to office. Housing starts are up 26% since last year. Well, I'll give you the tip. In order to complete a house, you've got to start the house. That's the way. That's the order of the process. That's the way that it works. Completions are up. Completions are up too. We're delivering 55,000 affordable new homes under those programs, more than 6,000 of those already built.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Brown, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. The Albanese Labor government is committed to making housing fairer, particularly for renters and people struggling to buy their first home. What are some alternative views in the community about housing policy?
Thank you, Senator Brown. Minister Ayres.
Well, we know all about Senator Bragg and his colleagues' views. They're not a surprise. Disappointing, but not a surprise. What surprised me is how much the One Nation Party once again just sound like the poor old Liberals. You know, once more, sound like the Liberals again. It's that kind of thinking, Senator Cash, that's got you into the strife that you're in now. It's that kind of thinking that's got you into that trouble. Now, who needs the Liberals? Who needs the Liberals when you have One Nation? Australian voters, certainly in Farrer, have reached the conclusion they don't need the Liberal Party. I mean, at least Senator Canavan was down there campaigning in Farrer. I saw him. He was in his flannel shirt. I'll give you the tip, Senator Canavan. You don't iron the flannel shirt. You just put it on.
Ayres, resume your seat. Order, Senator Canavan. Order. Please continue, Minister Ayres.
It's Senator Flanavan, right? Senator Flanavan. You don't iron the flannel shirts before you pose for the picture in the caravan park.
Senator Thorpe.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister for Indigenous Australians. In the Northern Territory, data shows only 17.5% of First Nations children being removed are placed with Aboriginal family under the Aboriginal Child Placement Principle. Despite this, the Northern Territory government today introduced legislation to further weaken that principle. The National and Northern Territory Indigenous Children's Commissioners have said these laws should be paused until an inquiry into the system is complete. Do you agree with the Commissioners that this legislation should be stopped?
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Mr McCarthy.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Thorpe for the question. There's two elements to this that I think is really important for the Senate to be aware of, President. One is that clearly the Northern Territory government have embarked on a piece of legislation that they already had in place prior to what we saw, and this Senate gave a condolence motion yesterday in regards to what has happened in Alice Springs. And with the decision by the NT Children's Commissioner and the Australian First Nations Commissioner for Children, those decisions came about, Senator Thorpe, as a result of the concerns that were coming through what was happening in Central Australia. I have certainly reached out to the Minister for Child Protection in the Northern Territory, expressing my concerns that unless the Minister is working with the First Nations—
Order.
No, actually, Senator Price, that is absolutely not true. No, it's not true, Senator Price. No, it's not true, Senator Price. And I think please have some respect. Please have some respect, Senator Price.
Minister McCarthy, please resume your seat. Order. You will listen in silence or leave the chamber. Minister McCarthy, please continue.
Thank you, President. So, as I was saying, that what I've asked certainly the Northern Territory government to do in this instance, in reference to Senator Thorpe's question, is to ensure that they do meet with the Aboriginal organisations, the Aboriginal Children's Commissioner, both in the Northern Territory level and also the National Children's Commissioner that we put in place here because we are concerned about our First Nations children right across Australia. And that is important. This parliament supported that, endorsed that, because we know by having that position in place that that commissioner at the national level could look out for our children.
Thank you, Minister. I'll wait for silence. Senator Thorpe, first supplementary.
Thank you. The two commissioners, Aboriginal women and child wellbeing experts offered to lead an inquiry into the system. Instead, the Northern Territory appointed a former police officer for this role. What do you think should this inquiry about Aboriginal families be led by a cop or by Aboriginal experts?
Minister McCarthy.
I think what's important here, President, is that there is a coronial investigation underway, there is a police investigation underway, and we want to make sure that the words we use do not jeopardise certainly that legal investigation that's underway. Now, in terms of the roles of the NT Children's
McCarthy,
Commissioner,
please resume your seat. Senator Thorpe.
Just on point of order on relevance, this isn't about the coronial inquest or anything else. This is about the child placement principles.
Thank you. And the minister's being relevant to your question, Senator Thorpe, and I'll continue to listen carefully. Minister McCarthy.
Thank you, President. Senator Thorpe, what's important here is that the NT Children's Commissioner and the National Children's Commissioner are heard in terms of what they are requesting to the Northern Territory Government.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Thorpe, second supplementary.
Thank you. The Commonwealth has power under the Constitution to override Northern Territory legislation, which has been done in the past with euthanasia. We are hearing calls for another intervention against our people in the Northern Territory, but with so many laws attacking us in the Northern Territory, isn't it time for an intervention against the racist Northern Territory government instead?
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Minister McCarthy.
Thank you, President. Well, we've heard and seen what an intervention in the Northern Territory has done to the families of the Northern Territory, and it hasn't been good, Senator Thorpe. We know, President, we know that there are members opposite who are also calling for an intervention into the Northern Territory.
Minister McCarthy, I'm sorry, please resume your seat. Order. Senator Thorpe and Senator Nampijinka-Price, come to order. Minister, please continue.
So these calls that I'm getting and this parliament hears for an intervention in the Northern Territory, and to go to the question of the power of the Commonwealth, we know that the Commonwealth has the power, President, to intervene at any time for any law into the Northern Territory. But what we must do here as legislators, is be responsible about the power that we have. Just because we have the power to do that doesn't mean we should be using it.
Order. Order. Senator Nampijinka-Price, I have called you about 4 times. I expect you to come to order when I request it. Senator Cash.
Thank you, President. And my question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. How many times before last year's election did the Prime Minister promise the Australian people that he would not make changes to negative gearing?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister Wong.
Thank you. There has been a change in policy, and the government's upfront about that, and the Prime Minister's been upfront about that. And why have we changed our position? We have changed our view because we look to what is occurring in this country and the intergenerational inequity that is becoming entrenched. And so,
Senator Cash.
Thank you. And it is a point on direct relevance. The government have broken a promise. I'm interested in knowing how many times before the election, President, the Prime Minister said he wouldn't make changes.
Senator Cash, I will entertain your points of order, but they are to be made without statements. The Minister is being directly relevant. She's only just started her response, and I'll continue to listen carefully. And if the Minister isn't being directly relevant, I will remind her of your question.
I have heard the question, and I have acknowledged up front that this is a change in policy, and we are up front about that. This is a change in policy, and we are up front about it. But what the senator doesn't want to discuss is the why. because they have no substance, because they are not able to articulate a clear
Minister
tax
Wong,
policy.
please resume your seat. Senator Cash.
President, with all due respect, it is direct relevance. This is a question I posed in relation to something that happened prior to the election. For example,
Senator Cash,
97 times
Cash,
you said
Senator Cash,
275.
Senator Cash, you are making the statement again. The minister is being relevant, and I will continue to listen. Minister Wong.
I again say we are upfront about the fact that we have changed the policy position. And, Senator, I know that what you want to do is have a process argument, an argument about that, because you cannot actually engage with the policy. You are incapable of engaging with the policy, and you are incapable as an opposition.
Wong, please resume your seat, Senator Cash.
I'm going to keep trying, President. Direct relevance. The Leader of the government is refusing to engage in the question.
Thank you,
How many
Cash.
times?
Thank you, Senator Cash. The minister is being relevant to your question, and I will continue to listen carefully. And I'd ask for silence so that I can hear the minister. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Well, Senator Cash, you're entitled to ask me a question. You're not entitled to determine how I answer.
Could you at least
and I have been very clear. I have been very clear. I have been very clear that we have changed our policy position, and we are upfront about that.
How many times?
And the reason we have done it is because of what the budget papers tell us and what young people tell us, which is that Australian aspiration, that Australian dream of home ownership is slipping away from generations of Australians, and we do not wish to stand for it. That is fundamentally the issue. And you will hear from this opposition, with all the drama that Senator Cash can muster, a lot of discussion about that. What you will not hear is what they are going to do to ensure young Australians can own their own home.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Cash, first supplementary.
How many times did the Prime Minister, prior to the last election, promise the Australian people that he would not make any changes to capital gains tax?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister Wong.
I give the same answer.
Of course you do.
We did go to the last election with a policy position that we have changed, and we are upfront about that. And we are accountable to the Australian people for that. And what we say to the Australian people, as we have done this, because what we can see, despite all the work that we are doing on housing supply, is that absent changes that the Treasurer announced last night, that young Australians will continue to be locked out of the housing market. They will not be able to build the sort of security that their parents and their grandparents did, and we want them to be able to. We want them to be able to, and that is the difference between this side of parliament and that side. The status quo is not working for young Australians. And you only need to look at the budget paper to look at the extent to which intergenerational inequity is worsening. Well, that is not the thing that we want for this country, and that is why we have put this budget forward.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Cash, second supplementary.
How many times did the Prime Minister, prior to the last election, tell the Australian people that he would not increase taxes on family trusts?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister Wong.
Well, again, what I would say to Senator Cash is, if you look at what the Treasurer spoke about last night, the growth in trusts has been remarkable, and 82%, I think it is, over 80% of trusts have no underlying business operations. Now, we have been clear about excluding various categories of trusts, including farming trusts and testamentary trusts. But fundamentally, if you have a tax vehicle where 82% of trusts actually have no underlying business, what that says is, well, perhaps we should actually think about how we provide equitable tax arrangements for those tax arrangements, and we have done that. Fundamentally, what this budget does is says we will try and make the taxation of assets more equivalent to the tax that nurses and tradies and plumbers and construction workers
Order. Senator David Pocock.
Thanks, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, Senator Ayres. Minister, I refer to reports in the Australian Financial Review that energy ministers are considering rules to require data centres to fully offset their power usage. Is this confirmation that the voluntary national expectations the government released in March will be insufficient to effectively regulate data centres' impact on our energy and water resources?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Ayres.
Well, Senator Pocock, it certainly is not. It certainly is not. When I announced earlier this year that the expectations for data centres, I was very clear. that set of expectations that we had would need to be operationalised through the states in terms of planning approvals. Now, we have in the government some of this work been conducted by my very able colleague from the House of Representatives, Assistant Minister Charlton, been engaging directly with data centre developers to make sure that they understand that what we require from them is additional electricity generation and transmission investment. We want, just like we want to see in big industrial electricity investments, those investments underwrite at scale additional generation to put downward pressure on prices, not just for their businesses, but also for all Australian businesses. And you'll have seen the investment that the government made, along with Mr Crisafulli and the Queensland government, in the Boyne aluminium smelter. $1 billion from the Commonwealth Government, $1 billion from the Queensland Government, $7.5 billion from Rio Tinto been invested in new renewable electricity generation for Queensland. That is a slam dunk for Queensland. It means more generation, more transmission, lower prices, industrial jobs, and I want to see, and I'm glad that my colleagues in the state government's energy ministers are prepared to operationalise those principles as they do their important work in the states.
Senator Pocock, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister. Minister, it's interesting that Queensland is the one state that won't actually sign up to the new energy minister's rules. The next DC CEO told Alan Kohler on his podcast, That's Business, which is well worth listening to, that the national expectations were basically just the current rules that have been put up on a website. Why have we got such lax government guardrails when it comes to data centres and when it comes to artificial intelligence?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Ayres.
Well, Senator Pocock, I'm not sure I agree with any of that proposition. We've been very clear, both in our National Artificial Intelligence Plan and the data centre expectations. The approach of the Australian government is that while it is in the interests of Australians that we secure as much as possible of that investment, not just in digital infrastructure, but in the tech economy more broadly in Australia, so we have agency and control and good jobs and a stronger, more secure Australia for the future. But we want to make sure that data centre development delivers for Australian jobs, Australian skills, Australian communities, and that the national interest always comes first. That is what our framework is all about. It is in the Australian national interest and in the interests of Australians.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Pocock, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, given that the Commissioner of Jobs and Skills Australia has said that we can probably expect at least 600,000 job losses due to artificial intelligence in Australia, how's the government actually thinking about the trade-offs? How do you think about this huge benefit from data centres with the building effort that's taken away from constructing homes that your government desperately says that you need? How are you weighing up these trade-offs and not actually having clear guardrails and more than just expectations, which are the current rules on the website?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Ayres.
Well, Senator Pocock, President, through you, President, the data centre expectations are being operationalised. They are reflected in the agreements that the Australian government has reached with a number of these organisations. The data centres and digital infrastructure operators are not the only interests, not the only technology that we want to see here in Australia. I want to see the tech sector right through the stack being built here in Australia by Australians in the Australian national interest. That is why we are operationalising that in a cooperative way with the states. Why we want to see where the rubber hits the road in terms of planning approvals, states ensuring that there is additional electricity generation, so it puts downward pressure on electricity prices.
Senator Sterle.
Thank you, President. My question is to the only competent minister representing a Prime Minister since 2013, Senator Wong. Last night, the Treasurer announced Australia's fuel security and resilience package in the federal budget, which will help to immediately secure more fuel, strengthen Australia's supply chains and build long-term resilience. Can the minister explain why acting now to strengthen Australia's fuel resilience is so important?
Thank you, Senator Sterle. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President, and thanks to Senator Sterle for the question. And Senator Sterle, probably more than almost anyone on this side of the chamber, except perhaps Senator Sheldon, understands the importance of fuel to keeping Australia's economy going. And I thank him for his work, and I thank him for his interest in this area, because he's right. Last night we saw the Treasurer build on the Prime Minister's earlier announcement of a $14.8 billion fuel security and price relief package. $7.5 billion to shore up Australia's near-term fuel and fertiliser security through the fuel and fertiliser facility. Over $3 billion invested to help build our long-term aviation and fuel supply resilience through our own Australian Fuel Security Reserve, a permanent government-owned fuel reserve of around 1 billion litres. And, of course, the government will also lift the minimum stockholding obligation to increase Australia's reserves of diesel and jet fuel to 50 days. And this government, this Labor government, is implementing a landmark Labor reform, domestic gas reservation, a reform that is all about delivering cheaper gas for Australians and shielding our economy from global shocks. The reservation is an investment in Australia's sovereignty, and it is an investment in Australia's economic resilience. These are all elements of Labor's comprehensive plan to provide certainty today, to shore up supply tomorrow, and, most importantly, to secure Australia's fuel security for the future. We all know that ongoing conflict in the Middle East has generated uncertainty in the community, in industry, in agriculture, and we know there is no part of the world that will be wholly unaffected by disruption. But the measures put in place by the Albanese government will help provide certainty in an uncertain world, and will protect Australians from the worst effects of global events.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Sterle, first supplementary.
Yes, thank you, President. The minister has outlined how events in the Middle East are having a particular impact on our region's fuel supply. Could the minister provide more detail about how the Albanese Labor government is working with our partners in the region to ensure regional fuel and energy security?
Thank you, Senator Sterle. Minister Wong.
Thank you, Senator Sterle. In our conversations with our partners in the region, our message has been that we can count on each other. The Prime Minister has made clear the quality and reliability of Australian agriculture, of Australian resources, including Australian gas, has been critically important to the assurances the government has been able to receive for future supplies of petrol, diesel and fertiliser to Australia. As a result of our work, we have new agreements signed with Singapore, Brunei, Korea, Japan and Malaysia to help ensure the continued flow of essential fuels and fertiliser to Australia. The Chinese government has agreed to facilitate engagement with Australian businesses on jet fuel. We know we assure our energy security by working with trusted partners and friends, and we will continue to strengthen our international relationships so as to respond to this unprecedented shock to the global economy.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Sterle, second supplementary.
Thank you, President, and I thank the Minister for outlining the ways that the government has been working with countries of the region to ensure Australia's fuel security. How does the Albanese Labor government's approach to ensuring regional fuel stability and security during the current crisis in the Middle East compare with any other alternatives?
Thank you, Senator Sterle. Minister Wong.
Well, thank you, Senator. And in the face of the worst fuel crisis the world has seen, the Albanese government has acted responsibly, consistently, to secure supply, to implement relief for Australian consumers, to support our industry and to show national leadership. What have we seen from those opposite? Well, we do know that the Leader of the Opposition, when he was in government, made the call to store Australia's fuel reserves in Texas. Fantastic. We also know that whilst those opposite were in power, 4 out of 6 of Australia's refineries decided to shut down. And we do know also that the Shadow Treasurer and apparent leadership hopeful, Mr Wilson, can't decide if his plan costs $80 billion or $800 million. And of course, Mr Wilson and Senator Hume are looking, of course, to forming a coalition with One Nation. Goodness me. Really, those opposite are so busy fighting for their own survival, you're not fighting for...
Thank you very much. Senator Bragg.
Thanks, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. The government has conceded that its higher housing taxes will now reduce housing supply by 35,000 dwellings. How will building fewer houses help younger people?
Thank you, Senator Bragg. I'm just waiting for silence. Order. Minister Wong.
Well, that is untrue, Senator. There are 35,000. As a result of the government's policies, there are 35,000 more houses built than in the absence of the government's policies, including those in the budget. And you know that. And what I would also say, Senator, is you understand there are 2 issues here. One is the composition of those who own homes, and one is the number of homes. Not only are we adding to supply, we are also determining, through the changes we are making, and you would understand this, that we want a different composition in the housing market because we want more owner-occupiers owning homes. Simple as that. Because you know that the way to ensure that we get first home buyers into the market is to level the playing field for them. And the problem with your position, Senator, is that you are insistent that they are not entitled to a level playing field. That is the position of those opposite. Now, we are being clear that the impact of our tax and other housing policies will increase housing supply by at least 30,000 over the medium term, including through the $2 billion local infrastructure fund, which will support up to 65,000 homes. In addition, the tax changes that we have announced will see 75,000 additional owner-occupiers over the decade. That is the position that the government has set out in the budget. That is what happened. Well, that is what Treasury is clear in its advice, and that is the effect. And the reality is, Senator, the reality is you on that side are happy with the status quo. Young Australians are not happy with the status quo.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Bragg, first supplementary.
Thanks. The Prime Minister has used negative gearing for decades to build a property portfolio. Why is he cutting off this opportunity for younger people?
Thank you, Senator Bragg. Order across the chamber. Order. Minister Wong.
Senator, you understand that the policy that is announced enables people to still use negative gearing when they invest in a new build. But we have a situation where housing prices have diverged from incomes and have risen 400+% between April 1999 and April 2026, twice as fast as incomes have risen, as average incomes has risen. Now, you might think that's all right, Senator. This is about housing affordability.
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. I'm waiting for order. I'm waiting for order. Senator Bragg.
Point of order on relevance, President. The question was about the Prime Minister cutting off the opportunity he's used for younger people.
The minister is being relevant to the question, and if there's silence in the chamber, I'll be able to hear the minister more clearly. Minister Wong.
I began my answer with a very clear answer, Senator, which is negative gearing is still available to those who invest in a new build. But the fact that you took the interjection on relevance shows you don't understand the problem, because what I was reading out is the problem. That is the problem. When you have 400% increase in housing values and they are decoupled to the extent that they are from income growth, then you lock young people out of the market.
Thank you, Minister.
That is the problem we are seeking to fix.
Senator Bragg, second supplementary.
All right. This is a very simple question. Very simple question. Will the minister guarantee to young Australians that Labor's higher taxes will result in more homes being built?
Thank you, Senator Bragg. Minister Wong.
The budget papers make very clear that this package adds to housing supply, and I want to give you a quote.
Order.
This quote. Today it's time to be honest. The tax system is screwing over young Australians. Instead it favours well-off established interests against those trying to get ahead. You know who that was? Your shadow treasurer. And on that, I ask that further questions be placed on.
Thank you.